for the unpacked.
They just spread it out sort of proportionally.
Everybody's getting
What conference is it? So your DS
no, Dallas is a different conference.
Okay.
So Houston
That is
is
what
the municipal
The thing is, she
residency.
sheds like crazy.
Is that you?
No, Hughes are last
No, that's right, that's right, that's right.
So
Yeah.
what does that mean?
How
to
long
this
is your
flight?
Disaffiliated.
Disaffiliated, so that means you're.
Fortunate with her, she's been, you know, we've had her for a couple of years.
I didn't know any church on that.
Well, you either affiliate with a new denomination or you go as a member.
Yeah.
So we're going to.
It was good.
Right.
Well, Methodist Church stands.
Is.
It's the continuation of UMC, but
Right.
so basically everything's the same.
It's almost identical except for.
Quality changes. Better accountability.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah, so part of the problem with the Methodist church, that's all my statement. In terms of the different, different.
Winston.
What am I looking for?
Oh, wow.
Not just different conference.
Yeah.
Jurisdiction. Let's say he's a bishop, and I'm a bishop. It feels maybe or something.
I was,
Yeah, I can't do
have a
it
clue.
because we're in different jurisdictions. So I can't free charge. That's part of the big push in Methodist churches. You have people out west. And doing some stuff.
And they were the
Out west.
Oh,
Oh, I didn't know you could cross jurisdiction.
it goes to the judicial council. The judicial council rules that the open meeting practicing
And that she's also trained
bishop
to respond to certain
should not be a bishop. That jurisdiction has been charged.
Well, let's
Applying.
try to pull things together and get going. We're a little past time, but that's okay.
It's nasty. That's why I'm getting out. So I don't know how much you do want to understand.
Okay, we basically assume that you are here because you are pretty well finished with chapters 1 and 2. I'll assume that to be the case. Now, very often students are allowed to begin to work on chapter 3 before chapter 2 is completely finished, especially if we're coming up on a deadline related to IRB approval. Now, of course, you can't write chapter 3 before you write chapter 2 because chapter 2 has to inform chapter 3. But almost any chapter dissertation will need some editing later on, even near the very end of your program. Pardon me. So our plan for this group is to basically go through chapter 3, look at all the aspects of chapter 3, answer some questions about different categories, different headings, share with you what Dr. Marmon and I have seen over several years of pitfalls, common mistakes made in chapter 3, and help you try to avoid those. Now, I know that some of you and some of our folks online actually already have IRB approval. So your 3 is done, you've got IRB approval, you're either ready to collect data, you're collecting data now, or you've collected your data. So if you're at that point, you know, while we're going through chapter 3, why don't you just keep up with your email or whatever. If you want to listen, that's okay. There might be something in chapter 3 you want to go back and tweak. Obviously, you can't change anything that the IRB's already approved. That's against the rules, but you can do some polishing if you need to. So we'll go through chapter 3, then we're going to look at the IRB application, share with you our guidelines for completing the IRB application. But when we get to that point too, we want to talk to some of the folks who have some of you who have IRB approval, share with us some of the aspects of the process, what that was like, what maybe the IRB asked you for after you submitted your initial application, what you had to provide after that, and maybe share with us some pitfalls that you know about, some things to avoid when applying to the IRB so the process can go a little more smoothly. Okay, I'm going to pull up chapter 3 on the template. And hopefully you are all doing what we told you to do online a couple of years ago, type only in the template. Now, believe it or not, I had somebody that's been in the program several years who's actually going to take about 6 years to graduate, send to me this past week his chapter 1. It was an individual document that started at chapter 1 and ended at chapter 1. Nothing else was there. And I did what Ellen and I always do. I sent it back and said, I won't read it until it's in the template. And we encourage our coaches, who are not myself or Ellen, to do the same thing. You need to type in the template from day one and always type in the template. That way, the font size, the spacing, the margins, the headings, the page numbering in particular is all exactly right. And it'll stay right if you type in that. Now, some folks type in a separate document and then paste it into the template. That doesn't work either, because you'll bring formatting from the other document to the template and mess up the formatting in the template. So hopefully that's something I didn't even have to say, but every time we talk about dissertation, I am compelled to talk about it. So anybody have an unusual situation related to where you are, or is everybody in this room ready to talk about chapter 3 or beyond? Okay, sounds like we're good. Sorry. Chapter 3 starts like a lot of chapters do in the dissertation with an overview of the chapter. Now, the most common mistake here that I read in a chapter 1 overview or a chapter 3 overview is we get an overview of the project. This is not an overview of the project, it's an overview of the chapter. I'm sorry, I'm actually looking at a particular chapter 3, not the template. A mistake. There's something in that one. I have it here because I want to show some things to you that she did very well. Typed in the wrong search box. So overview of the chapter. What you say here is simply an overview of what's coming in this chapter. The reason for the project will be highlighted. The purpose statement and research questions will be shared. Methodology will be discussed. Participants, the ways that the data will be collected and analyzed. You can look at sample dissertations, and there are several of those in your dissertation resources Canvas classroom. You can look at some of those, and even in the notebook. You probably didn't get a physical one like people get when they come to campus, but you have this also in the dissertation resources classroom under the very first link, introduction. You have this full, like 180-page workbook. Unlike the template, this actually has examples of what comes under many of those headings. So the template is the first place to start. It basically tells you what goes there, but the workbook will in many cases show you what goes there. And the overview of the chapter paragraph is one you can almost take the one out of the notebook and copy it and replace the information about the project with information about your project, because we really want to see basically the same thing there, just highlights of what's coming up in this particular chapter. Then nature and purpose of the project. You talk a little bit about the project, and you include the exact purpose statement. Now, I have often found that I'll read a purpose statement in chapter 3, and it's worded differently from the purpose statement in chapter 1. Can't do that either. Every time you list the purpose statement, include the purpose statement in chapter 1 or 3 or 4, it's got to be worded exactly the same way. So be sure to put it in here the same way it was in chapter 1. Now, when it comes to research questions, you listed your research questions in chapter 1, but basically it should have been just the 3 or 4 questions. In chapter 3, you have to operationalize the research questions. You list the research questions again, worded exactly like in chapter 1, but then you list how you're going to gather data to answer that question. That's the important part there. And let me show you the example of that we have. I actually pulled this out of that dissertation. So you list the research question, like, what were the participants' knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors regarding the mission of God among the Latino adult Christians before their participation in a discipleship experience, focusing on spiritual ancestors? Obviously, this is a classic first research question for an intervention. What were the levels of whatever you're going to measure among the participants before the intervention occurred? Then she listed the data collected for this question provided a standard that measures the participants' self-perceived understanding about the mission of God prior to the intervention. A discipleship quantitative pre-survey was formulated whereby questions, and she lists which questions address the knowledge attribute of research question number 1, and listed the questions that address the attitudes attribute and questions that address the behaviors attribute. So you got to be very specific about how you're going to gather data. And if you're doing an intervention and you're measuring knowledge, attitude, and behavior, you've got to have some questions that are specifically about knowledge, and some questions that are specifically about attitude, and questions that are specifically about behavior. So once you've got all the answers to those and you're analyzing the data for chapter 4, like for her, that first set of questions, 2, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, and 18, you can actually do those individually, or you can average the score on each of those questions among all the participants on the pretest. Then average those scores on the post-test for those exact questions and see the difference in the average. And right there, you're finding the basic difference between their knowledge before and their knowledge after. Maybe knowledge before averages a 2.6 on the pretest, but then it averages a 3.4 on the post-test. You can actually calculate the percentage increase that is and say the knowledge of the participants increased by such and such percent. And that's generally about as much as you need to say about the quantitative statistics that you use in a pre and a post-test in an intervention. Now, you can do analysis of variance and standard deviations and all kinds of other t-tests, but you don't have to. You can use descriptive statistics and just talk about the increase on particular questions, or especially particular groups of questions. And then you might sort some of this out later on by the demographic data that you collected on your pretest, like age, gender, education level, years in the church, that sort of thing. Maybe older men changed in a completely different way than younger women did, or just men changed differently than women did, or people with postgraduate degrees changed differently more or less than folks with no undergraduate degree. So, and the reason we always say too, when you're working on your instrument, collect as much demographic data as you can think of, even though you're not sure you're going to use it. Because you might find later that there was a difference in the way the genders or the ages or the educational levels. And if you didn't ask for that, you obviously can't filter by it later. You may not need to filter by some of those things, but it's better to have more than you need in demographics than less than you need, because then you can't sort it by anything else later on. So those are the kind of things you'll be looking for when you get to chapter 4. She did the very same thing with the other 2 questions. So you want to do that too. You want to be very specific about which instrument and even which questions on which instrument help you answer that particular research question. And in an intervention, the pretest helps you answer the first question, what were the levels of knowledge, attitude, and behavior before the intervention. The post-test helps you answer the second question, what were those same levels after the intervention. But then the third question is usually what aspects of the intervention had the greatest impact on the changes in knowledge, attitude, and behavior among the participants. You'll answer that generally using some open-ended questions added to the post-test. It can even be it can be just the 3 questions. What did you find least effective about the intervention? What did you find most effective? What would you change if you could? Those can be 3 additional open-ended questions added to the post-test. The pre-test and the post-test have exactly the same questions. The difference is the pre-test begins with asking for demographic data and then the questions. The post-test begins with the questions and then has 3 open-ended questions at the end. What did you like least? What did you like most? What would you change if you could? And so between those open-ended questions and then interviews that you hopefully will do with individuals or focus groups that you'll do with 5 or 6 individuals at a time, where you'll ask those same kinds of probing questions. What was most effective? What was least effective? What would you change if you could? All of that data put together helps you answer the 3rd research question. What contributed most to the changes that you saw in the individuals during following the intervention? Any questions about operationalizing the research questions and how that ties to your instruments and questions?
Dr. Lowe, so,
Yes.
so when you say pre-test and protest, just to kind of keep that vernacular straight in my mind. So it's not as if we're doing a pre-test before we start the data gathering. In other words, a pre-test is part of the data gathering process.
That's right.
And then once you gather it, then the post-test, that's the net effect of everything that you started in the pre-test.
Right.
Okay.
Well, before if it's a 6-week study on how to be a missional church, the first thing you do is just kind of describe what's going to happen, then give them all the pre-tests and save those. Now, what you're going to do too is have them put some sort of code on their pre-test that identifies who they are, not their name. Maybe the first initial of their mother's maiden name and the middle 2 digits of their social security number. And then they'll put that on the post-test. So if you need to, you can see how one person's pre-test compared to that same person's post-test, but you won't know who they are. Because you can't have them put their names on there, because if they put their names on there, then they won't be fully honest. Especially if it's some of your congregants and you're their pastor, they'll answer the questions the way they think you want them to answer, not be truthful. So you give them that pre-test, has the code, then you do the 6 weeks. Then after the last session, maybe you have some refreshments and you give them the post-test, and there you've got your 2 pieces of data already. And of course, you'll analyze that like I described, and hopefully you'll have to do at least one other thing. You'll have to randomly interview some of the people involved, or put 5 or 6, or take 12 of them and put 5 or 6 in 2 different focus groups and ask them questions. But I recommend, if you have time, to do both those things, do the pre-test and the post-test. Maybe pick 10 of them to interview and 10 others that you didn't interview and put them in 2 focus groups of 5 each. That way you've collected additional data from 20 different participants, but none of them have had to do 2 other things other than the pre and the post-test. They've only had to do one other thing. I think some of you in this room are doing that exact thing. Now, if you're doing a pre-intervention, that's going to be your research questions are going to be operationalized differently, because it's not an intervention. You're not doing a pre and a post-test. But generally, your question is going to be about, you're going to not study for 6 weeks on how to be a missional church. You're going to come up with best practices on how to become a missional church. So you're going to talk to lots of people, lay people, pastors, professors, maybe some nonprofit organization directors who focus on being a missional church. Generally, your research questions are, in the opinion of all of these groups of people, what are the best ways to become a missional church? Question 2 is, in the opinions of all these same people, what are the obstacles that prevent churches from becoming missional? Question number 3, moving forward, what are best practices for becoming a missional church? So you're going to have a survey, maybe you're going to send out to everybody, like maybe 100 people, and it's going to have questions about what are ways that you know to become a missional church? What are obstacles that you know that stand in the way of being a missional church? Then hopefully from, let's say, those 100 that you sent the survey out to, you collected 70, which would be a great return, you're going to randomly pick 10 of them to interview and go deeper into those questions. Maybe pick 10 more and put them in 2 focus groups of 5, ask some of those questions. And one of the reasons to have interviews and focus groups is some people will tell you things when they're in an individual personal interview that they wouldn't say in front of anybody else. That'll be important. But then you're going to pick up things in a focus group that you might not get from an individual interview. Because somebody will say, well, I believe so-and-so, and somebody else says, wow, I never thought about that, but that's really true. So it'll bring things up in people's minds they didn't think about before. So you're going to do that, the survey, then you're going to do some interviews, then you're going to do some focus groups, and you're going to gather that data about what helps you be missional, what prevents you, what barriers stand in the way of being missional, and then that's what you're going to say, that's the way you're going to operationalize research question 1 and 2. Because you don't meet with them once and ask them about what works and meet with them again and ask them about what doesn't work, what the barriers are. You ask them both those questions at the same time. So the same, the way you answer research question 1 and research question 2 are going to be operationalized exactly alike. Then research question 2, the way it's operationalized, as I suggest to my students, you're going to put here, you're going to gather the way you're going to answer this question is a synthesis of the answers to questions 1 and 2, plus information from the literature review. Because you're going to be studying all about being a missional church in the literature. And no matter how many people you talk to, they're not going to know everything about how to be missional. They're not going to know every barrier to becoming missional. So you're going to put together everything you learned from your participants, add it to many of the things you learned from the authors in your literature review about what helps you be missional and what the barriers are, and all of that put together then answers question 3, moving forward, what are the best ways to become a missional church? Does that make sense? I'm assuming we have some intervention and pre-intervention in here. Interventions. Pre-interventions. Okay, got a pretty good mix of that. So do both those make sense? You have any questions about operationalizing your research questions, whether it be intervention or pre-intervention?
Just making sure. So our research questions as they appear in chapter 1, and then when they appear in chapter 3, we're expounding on that significantly in chapter 3, right? But the statement of the question needs to remain the same.
Exactly.
Okay, just making sure I lost it.
All you're doing different in chapter 3 is telling us how you're going to gather data to answer it. Okay, ministry context. I've had folks sometimes say they're going to do an intervention on learning more about sanctification. And suddenly I get a history lesson about the history of sanctification in Wesleyan traditions and that sort of thing. The theological context of sanctification. That's not what this is. This is the demographic context. If you're doing something in your own congregation, you'd put something here maybe about the demographics of your county and maybe the city, and then specifically your congregation. You know, average educational levels and income, median income, and that kind of thing. Demographics about the people you're working with. Now, that changes if you're doing a study that's going to involve, say, ministers in a 7-state area. That's possible, or even just a single state area, an entire conference or a district. Then you talk a little bit more about the demographics of the people involved, not necessarily about their communities, because they come from so many different communities. You might mention that you're involving pastors from rural areas and urban areas and suburban areas, but not much past that. You simply talk more about the demographics of the individuals, since you're drawing them from different geographical contexts. Make sense? Yes, Ben.
So right now, I may not know everybody that I'm going to get involved.
That's correct.
So how would I describe the demographics of people I don't know yet?
What does your project look like?
It's going to be working with pastors in churches, laity and pastors to identify how they're equipping people for ministry. So
how large of an area geographically?
Geographically, we're looking at a couple of states.
Okay. You'd simply say here that the participants are going to be ministers, and you're going to say they're either going to be like all ordained or some ordained and licensed lay ministers or whatever. You kind of describe who they are, maybe the kind of the age ranges that you know exist there. So as much as you can say about the people you're going to invite. So you simply speak about the invitation pool at this point. And then when we get to chapter 4, you actually get to create a chart that gives us specifics about who actually did participate. This many men and this many women and this many in this age range, this age range, this age range, educational levels and that sort of thing. So in chapter 3, you give basic descriptions of who you're going to invite to the study. And in chapter 4, you give very specifics about who actually participated in the study. Good question. Okay, now comes the section with like several subheadings, and it's participants. So first subheading is criteria for selection. So you're going to talk about how you selected them. You know, did you get the did you invite everybody on the ministerial roles in all 3 of those states? Did you invite everybody in your congregation between the ages of 18 and older? Or did you invite just millennials in your congregation, whatever age range that is now? My daughter's one, but I can't remember what the age is. Us boomers only know who's in the boomers. So you talk about how you're going to select them. And of course, there has to be some randomness to it. You can't just hand pick 25 people out of your congregation that you think will do a good job and learn a lot in this particular intervention. So you have to be random about it. Then you'll describe them. And again, all you're describing here is things about gender and age and levels of involvement in the church of the people you're going to invite. You don't know who's going to respond yet, but it's about who you're inviting. Then ethical considerations, you have to talk about your informed consent letter. You're going to share an informed consent letter with them that describes what they're participating in. And there's a template for that on the web, on the IRB website. You go to the IRB website under the seminary's web, and I'll show that to you later. That's where the application is. That's where the practice application is. And they actually have templates there. There's a template for the informed letter of consent. It doesn't have details about anybody's study. It's just generic. But it includes all the things you have to include. Like one thing that some people forget is that somewhere in there you have to say at any time during this project that you feel uncomfortable, you may withdraw with no questions asked. Everybody has to be given that option. And if you don't have it in there, when you send yours to the IRB, they will send it back and say, put this in there. So you'll talk about the informed letter of consent. You'll reference it because it'll be in one of the appendices. So you'll have it there. You'll reference it here. Then you'll also talk about how you're going to handle the data. That once the data is going to be collected with codes rather than names, so it'll be confidential. There's very seldom an opportunity for someone to use the word anonymous in this. Now, if you're sending something out to hundreds of people and they're going to just send it, they're going to do it on SurveyMonkey, and you're going to see a code or you're just going to see some demographics, but you will never ever see their name or never ever see them, then you can call that one anonymous. But if it's an intervention where you're going to be in a room with people, it's going to be confidential because you don't know who's filling out what, but it won't be anonymous. The only projects that are anonymous is when you have no idea who any of the individuals are. So most often we use the word confidential. It'll be confidential because we're going to use codes instead of names. Once the data is collected, it will be stored on a password protected computer. Or if there are physical questionnaires that are being filled out at a pre and a post test, it'll be stored in a locked cabinet, accessible only to the researcher. And you will plan, once the project is done, or maybe 6 months after the project is complete, the physical data will be destroyed or deleted permanently from the password protected computer.
Question. So what do you do in a case like If you're downloading your information to a flash drive, do you have to address that? Or a thumb drive?
Well, if you say the data is going to be stored on a password protected computer or in a locked cabinet or saved in a locked cabinet, you can be saying that just, I would assume then you're going to put the flash drive in a locked cabinet.
Okay, that helps.
I don't think you have to say specifically the computer, the flash drive, and physical copies.
Now, what do you also do in cases where you're recording Zoom interviews?
Well, those just need to be stored on the password protected computer.
Okay.
Because once the recording's done, Zoom obviously sends that back to you.
Right.
So you save that link on a password protected computer. Don't let anybody else get to it.
Okay, thanks.
Back there first, and then you, Paul.
Can we use a pseudonym for, those people whom we interviewed?
Absolutely. Yeah, when you're reporting in chapter 4, I mean, you can even say participant number 1 or participant number 7, or you can make up names. That would be fine too. Or if you're interviewing like leaders in different churches, you can say church 1 or church 2, or you can make up church names too, but you don't want to give away real identities.
Yeah, and then, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
And then what about the citation in the bibliography? We have to, list those, we have to give a reference, right?
For what?
In the bibliography.
I know, a reference for,
Yeah, if we use a pseudonym,
you mean like for an interview?
yeah,
Okay, are you talking about an interview with, you're going to interview somebody to gather data for chapter 2?
yeah, just for example, for chapter 3, I'm going to interview one of the church leaders.
Okay, but nothing about that will be in the bibliography.
Okay, all right, okay.
Yeah, if it's data collection, there's no reference to it, no matter what form it takes.
Thank you.
Okay, Paul.
So can the informed consent be a part of the first part of the survey?
Absolutely.
So like, for instance, I set mine up so that the first question is, do you agree or not agree? And if they disagree, it just takes them right out of the survey.
So you're doing it online?
Right.
Okay, good point. If you're in a physical room, they're going to sign a letter of consent and you're going to collect those. And then they're going to maybe do probably a physical pre and post test if you're doing something, an intervention in your church. If it's an online survey or something, this is also what the IRB will want to see. They'll want the first thing in that Survey Monkey survey to be the letter of informed consent. And when they get to the bottom, they either agree or disagree with it. If they agree with it, it takes them right to the survey. If they disagree with it, it kicks them out and won't let them see the questions. And you're going to have to send a link that'll show that first part, because the IRB wants to go in and test that. They'll want to make sure that when they click agree, they go to questions, and if they click disagree, it kicks them out or they don't see the questions. They'll want to know you've done that right before they'll give you approval. So thanks for bringing that up. Yes,
Dr. Lowe, just to clarify, so when I did my online survey, and I think I read this in the instructions, I was talking to James and he had the same experience. The instructions for IRB or in chapter 3 about that survey that's online say you just have to send the consent, approve, agree, disagree, kicks them out. You just have to send that to the IRB, and then you send your hard copy questions as well. But the IRB asked both James and I, the reviewer asked us for the entire electronic survey.
Okay. Well, I don't know if you can get away with just sending them the first part that shows how to kick you out and then send them a physical copy of the questions. They'll have to see all the questions one form or another. And it may be that if it's going to be an online thing, they want to see everything online to make sure it's all working right.
I think the instructions read one way, and then with the what we actually need to turn in is different.
Okay, so what you actually had to turn in was the full electronic version.
Correct.
Okay, and that's the kind of thing we want to know, is the people that have already worked with IRB, what did you find that everybody else needs to be sure to do?
They wanted both.
They wanted both?
They wanted the link to that, and they wanted the printed out
Physical copies?
yeah.
Okay.
I'm doing both, so I turned both
Yeah,
in.
it is both.
But I was just caught off guard about, we want everything. Because
Okay, see, I wasn't sure about that. I thought all they wanted to see electronically was just to make sure that initial agree, disagree worked, but obviously they want to see it all. So let's all remember that.
I was
Somebody,
just gonna say, similarly, I just copied and pasted the link to the survey, and then I just had a little addendum of the questions, and that was more than adequate. They never asked
wonder-
anything beyond that.
I wondered if it was just me and it was what I was asking about and they, oh, we want to see all your questions. I wondered if that, or on the electronic version, I wondered if that was the case.
well, sometimes the population you're working with, and if they even like lean toward a vulnerable population, they're going to want more. And that also relates to, it's an expedited, you ask for an expedited review if you know there's no vulnerable population involved in what you're doing. If it's all adults in the church, that's not a vulnerable population. If some of our folks do work with women who have been rescued from domestic abuse, that's going to require a full board review. And you're definitely going to have to be careful about the questions. So I appreciate that. Yes.
Dr. Lowe, yeah, you mentioned about the randomness of the people that we are selecting, right? Like making sure that we're not handpicking the people. Just from experience, like I've done the data collection already, like what I found with the randomness of the personal interviews was those people were not the most articulate. Like it was a sermon series that I had done. But the things that I really wanted them to talk about, like it just didn't work. And I had no way to, control that aspect. I guess that's part of the research then, right? Like I would have ideally wanted a candidate who could answer, based on what they've heard on the sermon and so on. But it just felt like some people were a bit vague in their responses. Yeah. And there's not much I can do about it, right?
Well, I would think if you did a number of interviews and you didn't really get some of the people that you knew would do pretty well, you could randomly select some more.
Okay.
So, I think you could probably even do that now. You could, if you have the time to do more interviews, just go ahead and invite more, randomly invite more people to do interviews. And hopefully you'll get some of those that are more articulate.
Okay.
And I guess one other approach to being random is instead of drawing the names out of a hat, which is probably what I told you to do a long time ago.
Yeah.
You can ask for volunteers. And maybe the more articulate ones, the more educated ones would be the ones that might possibly volunteer. As long as you don't handpick, if there's something random about it that you can defend, then I think you're okay. And there's no problem with following up. And if what you got in interviews or focus groups didn't seem to be enough, do some more if you have time, and that's okay too.
Okay, that's good to know.
With that said, is it adequate or good to, if you give a broadcast call, to also maybe give an individual appeal to somebody, or is that getting too gaming the system too much?
And if you're specifically inviting a particular person to participate, that's probably not a good thing. Unless you feel it's important to invite a particular age group or a particular educational level or something. If there's a group criteria that would include them and you'll interview everybody with that criteria, I think that might be acceptable.
You have one person in your church that was born on March 13th, 1973. That's the age group you're looking for.
I don't think, so sorry, Carter.
So what if I'm trying to, how do I say this? So what if the group that you're assessing the impact of your program on is very specific? And so like mine is with current and potential church leaders. Like I'm going to go and invite people who are current and potential church leaders. Does it make sense to that?
Well, current and potential church leaders is a criteria.
Okay, I was just making sure that wasn't somehow manipulative.
No. And how many do you think that'll be?
Oh, I don't know, 35,
Okay.
40.
Well, if it's going to be like 15 or 20, you might interview them all. If you want to make sure and not miss somebody that you think would do a good interview. Now, 35 would be a little much.
Well, they're being split into two parts. So Chris suggested getting qualitative data both from one-on-one interviews and focus groups.
Right.
And so I'm kind of leaving up to them which one they want.
Right.
And he suggested if you don't have enough in one, just kind of going and asking in general, hey, would some of you be willing to go to this?
Right. Right.
And that's okay?
Yes.
Right.
And the good thing about using interviews and focus groups is, again, you maybe interview 10 and put 10 other different people in 2 focus groups. So everybody, 20 people are doing one more thing, so they're not being asked to do too much, but you're also getting data from 20 additional individuals. Right, in that way. Yes, Paul.
So I'm casting, for my survey, I'm casting a wide swath. I have no idea how many people will be responding. Hopefully thousands. Serious, no, not serious. But anyway, so I have an opt-in question at the end. Would you like to participate in a focus group on this? What if I get overwhelmed by the number of votes? Do I then just pick random, or do I have to, if they say they want to be a part of the group, do I have to have a group for them?
No, no. You would randomly choose from those people who said they would do that to put the focus groups together, and then simply send a message to the others saying,
Okay.
Sorry, the response was overwhelming. We just don't have the capacity to do enough focus groups to include everybody, but thank you very much.
So should I put that information in my chapter 3, that I'm going to do it that way? Or by the end of it, I'll know whether.
You don't have to put it in chapter 3 because you don't know what's going to happen.
Okay.
If it happens, then we can record it that way. And sometimes things will happen, you know, something, it won't be different from what you got IRB approval for, but something happens a little differently in the actual implementation of the project than you said in chapter 3. You can, and we often have students, okay, go back and reflect that in chapter 3 now that you know that's what happened. Without, and we're not breaking any rules as long as we don't change what the IRB approved for us to do.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yes.
When you do the interview with the select group that you want to interview, and you have 1 or 2 persons, you know, you ask a question, okay, and they seem to just talk so much, and you would then have to listen to the interview recording over and over again to know what they have said. And you're looking for just like 1 or 2 words you want to just write out, you know, in your chapter 4 as part of the responses from the interview. And you tend to understand what they're saying, but they haven't said that, you know, that word that you could pick out. So what do you do when you listen and listen, you know, like you've asked them a question like, okay, what do you think, or what are your views, or what would you suggest to be done, you know, on this particular issue? And they just talk and talk, but as they speak, you can actually, you know, read in between the lines, and on your own, you can figure out what they want to say, but they've not said it exactly. Now, so what do you do in that situation? Well,
it kind of sounds like that you're going into the interview looking for them to say particular words. Okay, well, we don't do that. We're about to talk about instrumentation. And we're going to talk exactly about that, about survey questions, interview questions, and focus group questions. But a question over here might precede that, so go ahead.
Yeah, it's a human subjects research question.
Sure.
So it might be twofold. The first one is that so I have IRB approval, and part of it is that I have it's going to be, you know, subjects doing 30-minute interviews with me, a qualitative project, and they're going to be from the US, UK, Canada, and potentially Northern Ireland, or well, that's part of that. And there was nothing, like I did all the research to try to find human subjects policies out there for other nations, couldn't find any. I noted that in my IRB application and it was approved. Can I assume that we're good to go?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's just, I couldn't find it. It was pretty, you know, detailed in the human subjects research that, you know, making sure these other nations don't have things that would apply.
Oh, yeah.
But I thought that would be sensitive subject types of things, because mine's on like spiritual formation.
Right.
Questions.
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk about that when we look at the IRB application too.
Okay.
That is one of the questions, obviously. Okay, so we're at instrumentation in chapter 3. Couple of things here. The first category is pilot test or expert review. Now, first thing you're going to do is like describe your instruments before we get to like right under instrumentation. Go ahead before you get to pilot test or expert review. Describe your instruments. There's a pre and a post test. Describe them and reference where they are in the appendices. There's a set of interview questions. Have those in the appendices. There's a set of focus group questions. Put those in the appendices. So you talk about all the 2 or 3 instruments that you have, or more if there are more, and then you talk about pilot test or expert review. I'm not even sure I remember anybody ever doing a pilot test. Almost everybody does an expert review. First point is, if you're using a pre-published instrument like Spiritual Well-Being Inventory out of the Measures of Religiosity book, the pilot test and expert review category can disappear. Pilot test and expert review are only for researcher designed instruments. If it's pre-published and has been validated and used, and you use that one, you don't have to talk about it under that heading. If you design it, which many of you need to do because you're working on a particular topic that there's not a pre-published instrument that would measure that, then you would generally do an expert review, not necessarily a pilot test, because a pilot test would involve doing the whole project with a group of people first that aren't going to be involved when you really do it to gather data for your project. So it's like double duty. Expert review is easier because you need like 3 people to review your instruments, your surveys, your interview questions, your focus group questions, to help you make sure they're clear. They're asking for the data that you really need. They're asking the right questions in the right way. They're not offensive. They're understandable. Your first expert reviewer can be your coach. One of your other expert reviewers can be me or Dr. Marmon. And that will even apply to me after I retire, which technically I did on June 30th, but my replacement's not here, so I'm still doing my job until that person gets hired. But I'm going to continue to coach people, and I could continue to be an expert reviewer for you. Sometimes Dr. Marmon and I both do it, and we're the other 2 people. But if you choose one of us, plus your coach, and maybe there's somebody in your congregation that's involved with a company that does a lot of research, or they're a psychologist, or they're a community college professor or university professor, somebody with a doctorate or just with research experience, they would be great to review your instruments. And there's samples in the workbook of the kind of form you would send to them where they can mark needed, not needed, unclear, recommended changes, and even a letter that you send along with that to the expert reviewer asking them for the review. So there's guidance there. So you'll get 3 people to review them, send back their recommendations, and here's the key. You do that before the IRB application, because you want to get the responses from the expert reviewers, make the changes in the instruments that they recommend before you share those instruments with the IRB. Because once you share them with the IRB and they're approved, you can't change them. So this is like the one thing that happens before IRB approval, because you want to include what they've told you. Then reliability and validity of the project design. If it's a pre-published instrument where you find it, especially like in that book, Measures of Religiosity, it'll have the reliability and validity info there that you can simply copy into your document and reference it.
Where was that again? I'm sorry. Where was that again?
Oh, in the book?
Yeah, which book? I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
So it's called Measures of Religiosity. Its table of contents is in the dissertation resources folder in your Canvas classrooms. So you can look at every single instrument that's in it to see if there's one there that might relate to your topic. And if so, you can let us know, and we can actually send you a copy of those pages that will include how to get in touch with the people who created it to get their permission to use it. Yes.
Yeah, the expert review, are you going to reference the expert? To reference it in your work? Maybe I ask an expert to review my questionnaire.
Oh, you mean if you use an instrument out of that book, do you reference that book?
No, my questionnaires, if I ask an expert to review, am I going to reference them in my research?
Oh, no. You'll mention who did it and that you made the changes they recommended. I mean, you'll reference the persons, the people, yes. There won't be anything in the works cited, though.
No, but in the work.
Yes. As you say, I invited 3 experts to review, and here's their names and what they do. that's okay, because it's not, you're not giving away any personal information. You're not like saying where they are, or giving out their email addresses or anything.
The expert then is more of an expert on research or the expert on your topic?
Research. Now, it could be on the topic, but they need to have a little bit of experience in research, because they're evaluating each question. If it's clear, it's asking the right thing. If it's not asking anything sensitive, that sort of thing. So if there's someone that's an expert in the area that has some experience with research, which hopefully they would, that would be a great person to use.
Yeah, because for instance, I am doing multiple areas of the United States, and
Right.
I'm trying to get people from those areas to talk about their cultural context. So okay, I got it.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's see.
Are
Yes.
you only talking about quantitative research right now?
From reliability and validity.
In terms of getting expert review on questions?
Well, if you're doing, well, no, qualitative questions, sometimes even more than quantitative questions, need to be reviewed.
Right.
Yeah, either way, quantitative questions like a Likert scale, or qualitative questions, what did you like most? They all need to be reviewed. On reliability and validity, like I said, on the pre-published instrument, it'll have that information there. On one that you create, it's a little different. The best way I can describe it is to say, look at some other dissertations that had researcher designed instruments and look what they put there. Now, the best example of reliability versus validity that my wife often shares when she teaches dissertation training, you've probably seen some of her videos. There are videos in the dissertation resources classroom that cover every single heading in the dissertation. Let me just mention that some people, like they're working on chapter 3, they'll watch the video that covers a particular heading like instrumentation. They'll stop the video, they'll work on instrumentation, and then come back and start the video again, listen to the instruction on the next heading, then stop and type on that. So you can do them one at a time like that. But she gave an example years ago when we had a bathroom scale that weighed a couple of pounds lighter than the truth. And I replaced it with one that was exactly accurate, which I'll never do again. That didn't go very well. But what she mentioned was, between the two scales, the one that weighed less, it always weighed you less. So it was reliable in that it gave you the same kind of data every time, but it wasn't valid because it wasn't true. So reliability relates to, it works the same way every time. Validity relates to, it's really the right information every time. But again, the best way to know how to write that section is to look at a couple of examples, and there are several really good dissertations and dissertation resources for you to look at. Other questions before we move to the next heading? All right, am I making sense?
Yeah.
Okay, well, he thinks I am. Raise your hand if I'm not making sense. Okay. All right, just a couple more headings in chapter 3, and we'll have that wrapped up. Data collection. Now, in chapter 1, you gave kind of an overview of how you're going to collect data. Meeting with folks, you're going to give out a pre-test and a post-test, and you're going to collect those, and you're going to do some interviews, you're going to do some focus groups, that kind of thing. Now, in chapter 3, this needs to be like a recipe. Like if you've got a recipe for a really good chocolate cake, you follow that recipe and that cake comes out tasting really good. You should be able to hand me that recipe and I go do the very same thing, bake the very same cake following your recipe and your instructions, and mine tastes exactly like yours. You want enough detail under data collection that I could take your data collection section, go collect your data, and get basically the very same results you would get, because I want to do it in the same place, in the same kind of room, with the same kinds of people. I want to give them the same amount of time to fill it out. You want that kind of detail. Like the pre-intervention, we're going to meet in a classroom in the church. After some introductions, I'm going to hand out the pre-test on paper, or Before we even meet, I'm going to send out an email and give everybody a link to the Survey Monkey interview online and have them complete that before they come to the first class. When you're doing interviews, we're going to meet in a private room, a private office that has a window instead of like we're going to meet at Starbucks. That's not a very good place to do an interview because there's too many distractions. But you talk about the setting, the context, how long you expect it to last, how many questions you're going to ask, just all the details, detailed enough that anybody else could do the same thing and get the same results if they simply followed your recipe. Robin.
So from the research tool standpoint, that makes complete sense. The content, so when I think of this intervention and training that I'm doing, one of the things I wrestled with was how someone could actually, they could do the tools, they could do the setting, but can they actually present the content of the intervention in the same way that produces?
The content of the intervention?
So like if, for me, it would be a training with ministry leaders. For someone else, it might be a sermon series. But that actual content that you're testing, someone else would deliver that content differently than me.
Okay, well, we're not talking about, this is just data. This is how you're going to collect
This is
data,
just how, okay.
not how you're going to present the intervention.
I guess when I was trying to process, could someone do this again and get the same information? Wouldn't that impact the actual
Well,
intervention?
I'm not saying that you'll get the same answers every
Okay,
time,
Okay.
but it's done exactly the same way every time.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, same kind of room, same length of time, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Thermostat set,
I
same
was
level.
just about to ask. that. Do we have to- Honest to God, I was about to ask, does it need to be the same temperature?
I've never seen anybody put that thermostat at the same
Well,
level.
That's gonna happen.
But you wouldn't want to have it at 55 degrees for one and 72 for another, because they'll be too cold to answer. That would affect things, but it's not we're not looking for that kind of in the weeds detail. Now, just related, parenthetically related to the content, Robin, if it's an intervention, we don't want a word for word transcript in the appendix of what's going to happen every day over, once a week for 6 weeks in the intervention. You'll need that to do the intervention, but we want to see an outline in the appendix, an outline of like maybe a one-page outline for each of the 6 sessions, but not a word for word transcript of what you're going to do. And since I just said transcript out loud, before I forget it, if you record interviews or focus groups, which you'll want to do if you do them, that will need to be in your informed consent letter that they're giving permission for you to record. Now, a lot of people, if you feel like you need to, you can actually have those interviews or focus groups transcribed. You can either hire someone to do it, or there's some software that will help you do it. You can have word for word everything that was said in interviews or focus groups. But I generally recommend to the folks I'm coaching, record them. And while you're doing them, while you're doing the interview or doing the focus group, take as many notes as you can about what's said, but don't take so many that you never look up, that you don't make eye contact with who you're interviewing, or you don't make eye contact with the focus group. Be sure to do that. Take as many notes as you can. Then when it's all over, go back, open up the recording and start it, and don't transcribe every word that's said. Simply listen to the recording and expand your notes. Make sure you add everything else into your notes that you didn't quite pick up when you were doing it, because you couldn't write that fast. But then some of the notes you'll make during the interview of the focus group would relate maybe to like body language, because you can't hear that in the recording. So be sure if there's some body language or something that you think looks significant, make a note of that, because you can pick up the words later from the recording. So it's okay just to complete your notes from the recording rather than transcribe the recordings, because that can be time consuming and expensive. But if it's the kind of topic where you really need it transcribed, obviously you're welcome to do that.
So if you have the recording, can you just put the recording in the appendix without having to transcribe it?
How are you going to include something electronic in a book?
I mean, I'm saying like a reference to a website or something of that nature.
Well, see, let's see, you can't do that. You can't ever share that recording with anybody else.
Okay, I got it.
That's part of the confidentiality. Plus, we don't need it. Even if you transcribe it word for word or take a bunch of notes, we don't even want to see that in the appendix. You never put a full transcription of an interview or a focus group in an appendix. You don't even put your notes, because again, those are confidential. We don't need to see those. Good question. Okay, that was the thing I wanted to cover. But any questions about data collection and what needs to go in chapter 3 about that? Just a recipe of exactly how you want to do it, so somebody can do it the same way. Okay, data analysis. Describe here how you're going to analyze the data that you've collected. Now, we spoke earlier about the pre and the post test, where you're going to compare the pre-test score on a single question to another single question, where you're going to maybe get the average of the average score on that question with everybody in the group, compare that to the average score of that question on the post test, and see if there's a difference, see if it got better or worse. You want to do that with groups of questions, especially as they relate to knowledge, attitude, behavior, or whatever things you're going to be measuring. You can compare an individual's answer on the pre-test to an individual's answer on the post-test if you think it looks significant. Say one person went from a 1 to a 4. Nobody else did that. It's probably not significant since only one person did it, but maybe if several people did it, it might be worth noting. Maybe even try to figure out if that's a particular age group or a particular gender or a particular education level. But generally, you're going to do the averages of the groups of questions that relate to knowledge, attitude, and practice or behavior. Now, on qualitative questions, where it's like an open-ended thing, you're going to look at their written answers if they did written answers. So you're going to be listening to the interview responses or the focus group responses, and you're going to start listening for similar words. Now, here we're getting back to what you were talking about. Before you start analyzing your data, qualitative things, don't write down the words you're looking for. Don't presuppose. Don't bias yourself about what you're looking for. Simply listen to what comes up. So you note what sounds like significant words or phrases that the first person mentions. Then you listen to the next interview and look at your notes, and you list the words or phrases that seem significant that that person said. Or if you haven't written out, if it is a transcript, some people have done this, you use different highlighters. Every time you see this word, you highlight it with this color. Every time you see this phrase, you highlight it with this color. So you code it in some way, and then what you find, okay, it turns out that this particular word did show up 15 times. It's not one I was looking for, because I wasn't thinking about what I was looking for. I was just going to let the data speak for itself. So you highlight those and then look for repeated words, repeated phrases, and then you can begin to develop themes that have grown out of this. And when it comes to the best ways to be a missional church, this particular thing was mentioned by 90% of the participants. This has to be important when it comes to being a missional church. Or this barrier was mentioned by at least 60% of the participants. This is obviously a common thing that happens when you're trying to be missional. On qualitative things, you're doing what's called content analysis. So you would say that here. We'll do a content analysis of the open-ended questions, for the interviews, or the focus groups. Look for recurring words and phrases to develop what the general themes are that are coming up in people's answers in the data I collected. And as I mentioned, under quantitative, you could say we're going to use descriptive statistics to measure the changes in average score from pre-test to post-test, especially as it relates to the change in knowledge, attitude, and behavior, that kind of thing. So descriptive statistics works for the quantitative things. Content analysis is what you do for qualitative things. Questions about those?
I was wondering, are there any softwares that can do this work for us? Or is this done manually, this analysis? I have about 180 survey participants who finished both the pre and the post test. So it's a lot of data.
I think there's some that can help you.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't know the names of them at this point.
Okay,
The folks in the library might.
okay,
That'd be a possibility. Dr. Marmon might.
okay.
Obviously, she did the PhD, so she was a little deeper into research and data analysis than I was in the DMIN. So, and if anyone here knows of anything, we'd be more than for you
I can
to
share
happy to
something.
share that with us.
I think actually once you collate your data.
Yeah.
You know, then you can give somebody else to help you do the statistical analysis. But you must first collate your data.
Yeah.
Get the number of the responses, you know, all of that.
Right, yeah, I have collected, yeah, all the
Good.
data, yeah.
Now, if you just give the person and of course tell them questions so about attitude, knowledge, and all of that, then they will just put that into Excel,
Okay,
and Excel will just give you the analysis.
okay,
You know,
Okay, now I think what you're talking about is hiring a statistician.
see something like that.
Okay,
yeah.
you're talking about software that would help you.
Yeah, like it's a little bit expensive, I think, to have a private statistician, right? Yeah.
Now, we have a
There's-
professor here, Janet Dean, who was across the street for many years as a psychology professor. She has done that for many of our students. If you want to do more than just descriptive statistics, if you want the t-test and the standard deviation and things like that, she'll do that for you. But what you want to do is talk to, if you want her to do, her or some other statistician you know to help you with that, talk to them before you gather data so you can know what form they want to see it in later. And if you give it to them in the right form, in an hour or two, they can run all those tests for you. And it's not terribly expensive as long as you give it to them in a good form. But see, have you seen those things where it's like a cloud and some words are much bigger than others and smaller than others? Okay, obviously software does that.
Right.
And the biggest word in that conglomeration is the one that occurred most often. If it's a little smaller, it was less often. It's smaller than that, it was less often than that. So there's software that'll, if the software that'll do that, it'll obviously do what you need. I just don't know what it is and I apologize.
So if you get the, I don't know what you use for the survey. I use SurveyMonkey. If you get the basic subscription to it,
Okay.
It'll work through a lot of analysis, including building the word cloud.
Oh, you know it out,
You
yeah.
can tell it to compare one question to another. So if you're looking at a demographic, what did the males say about all these questions? It'll actually arrange all those for you.
Okay, okay.
And the basic subscription will actually allow you to download according to the questions you ask. You can download the surveys according to that question. So it'll vary it for every filter you use.
Okay,
So
okay.
that's been really helpful for me.
All right, yeah.
So that's like a subscription you pay something for, right?
You do.
Okay.
The basic is pretty cheap. I don't remember what.
Okay,
it
yeah,
is.
the free version won't do that. Some folks just use the free version and do it themselves. But you can get the basic subscription. And again, you don't have to pay for it for long.
Yeah.
Because you just sign up for that when it's time to analyze data and use it for a few weeks or a couple of months and then you're done. So I apologize, thanks for that, Thomas. I had forgotten that there were different levels of SurveyMonkey that would help you with that. Sorry, let's go to.
So
Carter.
I'm using the spiritual well-being exam or assessment, whatever. Would it make sense to take that, put it in SurveyMonkey and send it out? So I'm doing it before the program and then I'm doing it 4 weeks after the conclusion of the program. Would it make sense to do that?
I would think so, if you're willing to pay for that basic subscription and let it do the data analysis for you. I think it would be.
Okay. Well, that changes everything.
Very good.
It's related with the previous
I'm
question.
gonna rewrite it.
I did my data collection all with hard copies because the pastors, evangelists have no smartphones, laptops,
Right.
and so on. That is the reality.
Right.
And I already collected all the data on hard copies. Now I want help, how I can, collect that, analyze the data on some applications. That is my concern now.
Like a software application that would help you analyze the data?
Is it possible to transfer the hard copy data information on application.
Like on Likert scale questions, you know, on scale of 1 to
Yes.
4 or something,
Yeah.
you should be able to put those in an Excel spreadsheet.
Mhm.
And Excel will actually do some of that analysis for you. Have you seen those books? They're always about that thick and called like Statistics for Dummies or something like that. There's one of those that's on statistical analyses available in Excel. Or you can find a book that'll tell you how Excel will do that. So, and I forgot about that. Excel will do a lot of statistical analysis if you can find the instructions for that. It's in there. Gosh, there's billions of things in Excel that I don't know how to do. I know the basic things and basic formulas, but so that would be one way to do that. Transfer it into Excel and do it. Or if you put it in Excel and get a statistician to do that for you, which would cost a little bit, that would be an option too. But you should be able to find out how to do it in Excel. That might even be a workshop you could find, an Excel workshop you might be able to find. You could even do online.
Yeah.
Okay. That might be a possibility. Yes.
Yeah, this just bridges this question to the last section. If I already have IRB approval, can I add in that I want to use transcription software? Or I was wondering how locked in you are once you have IRB approval on, I understand the things you can't change, but like I didn't have that I would use this transcription service.
Did you say that did you tell the IRB you want to transcribe the
Yes.
instruments? Okay. The problem would be if you used a service,
Yeah.
they would want to see whatever document the service produces along with that promises confidentiality.
Got it. So if I wanted to do that, right now I'm going to be doing it by hand, which is what I said I would do. And then I'm doing the calculations and it's going to be a long time. So would I just resubmit directly to the IRB that question or the?
Yes, you just do an addendum.
Just do an addendum.
But send back to the IRB at Asbury Seminary. I'd like to add this addendum. I plan to use service.
Sure.
Here is their promise of confidentiality.
And then I can integrate it in.
Right.
Okay, good.
And that comes back to what you said about if you share your data with somebody like a statistician or someone, or somebody else is going to, Robert, somebody else is going to lead one of your workshops or something. Any other person that's going to be directly involved with the individuals in your project or are going to see the data have to sign a confidentiality agreement that the IRB wants to see. Now, some students ask me, does the IRB want to see the letters of informed consent that all my participants sign? No, they've already approved you before you get to that point. But if anybody else is going to help you or see your data or meet your people, they have to sign a confidentiality agreement promising they won't tell anybody else about anything they heard. That has to be done beforehand and submitted to the IRB. And there's a template for that, just like there is for an informed consent letter on the IRB website.
In my case, I want some exposure, and I want to identify the application. Once I see, I will do it by myself. I think I don't need any.
Oh yeah. If nobody else is involved, nobody has to sign a confidentiality agreement. And I think, Paul, did you have another question that I didn't get?
No, it was.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, my question was, in my context, we are using monkey surveys, that kind of, modern way of doing survey. In my case, I have to individually hand out the questionnaires to pastors. So, but is this the best way, since collecting back all those survey, it's going to take time. So I would, maybe this is the best way to ask the pastors to take a picture of the paper and then send it through the WhatsApp. Is this the best way?
Well, how are you have participants like all over the place?
Yeah, in one district, but they are scattered.
Okay, so how are you originally planning to send the surveys to them?
I will just go to the church, to each churches, and just hand to the
You
pastor.
have the pastors hand them out? Okay. What, well, I think you'd want the pastors to just hand them out physically, not take pictures of them and send them to people. I don't think that works, because if they get the picture, then they're going to have to print it and then fill it out and then they're gonna have to take it back physically, or if they have to take a picture of it and send it back after they filled it out, you're gonna lose almost everybody. That's like way too much work. People don't want to do that. So I think you're gonna need for the pastors to hand them out, and then the pastors collect them, and then send them back to you, which means every one of those pastors is gonna have to sign a confidentiality agreement, because they will see a completed form. If they're only seeing the blank forms and the individuals are going to send it back to you, they wouldn't have to sign it. But if they're going to collect them after they're completed, they'll have to sign one, and you'll have to turn in all those forms to the IRB. But I would try to avoid the taking a picture and sending it to people.
I think partly, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mina, for them to return the completed form, to return it electronically, either take a picture and send it as a JPEG, or scan it and send it as a PDF,
Yeah.
in order to recollect it back. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, I don't have to physically go again and get back.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't take them to the pastors in the first place?
I didn't get.
Well, I mean, if you think they can do that, but it seems to me if they can take pictures and send them back as JPEGs, or scan them and turn them into PDFs, if they could do that, sounds like they ought to be able to get on SurveyMonkey. But if they don't have the technology to get to SurveyMonkey, are they going to have the technology to take pictures or turn them into PDFs?
Yeah, WhatsApp is the easy way to.
Okay, so you think the folks you're going to work with can take pictures and send them through WhatsApp?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think it comes down to whatever is going to work best with your population, where you think you can get the best results. And I just have to trust that, because I don't understand it, but you do. So talk about that specifically with your coach. And maybe once you've got that exactly laid out, share that with me and Dr. Marmon, and let us talk with you about it. Thanks for that clarification, brother. Yes, Mark.
You mentioned a while ago regarding the role of the researcher.
The what?
The role of the researcher. Doing analysis or data collection, that the researcher should maintain a non-biased position in doing research. What I made in my research, a pre-intervention, is that I'm going to use triangulation. It is mentioned by sensing.
Right.
So one angle would be, because my research is about discovering best practices of multi-site churches. So there will be one group of multi-site church pastors, and there will be one group of single-site pastors, churches, and then one angle will be me. So just want to ask if what I'm doing, what will I do is it's going to be, is there going to be a problem about triangulation?
Well, if you're collecting data from folks who were involved in multi-sites, folks who are not involved in multi-sites, what's coming from you? What are you providing?
Maybe my experiences or my point of view. Or yeah.
In analyzing what the other people said, you're going to filter that through your experience with multi-site? Or are you going to fill out one of the surveys yourself? Or the pre and post test? So I'm not really sure. For triangulation doesn't necessarily mean it has to be three things. It can be the two things. Basically, you have to collect data in at least two different ways. So you're not depending on just one source. But I really think when you're analyzing the data, you really are supposed to feed your opinion in there. What's in chapter 4 is what the data told you. It's not even yet what you think about the data. You can't talk about what you think about the data until you get to chapter 5. We'll talk about that too after lunch, exactly how chapter 4 is laid out, how the pitfalls of coming up with the summary of major findings at the end of chapter 4, and how they dictate the very first big part of chapter 5, and how important it is to have all that lined up. Does that help?
Okay.
Okay. Yes.
So out of three kinds of question, like interview question, survey question, and then another focus group question.
out of these three format, you have to follow three or two only, any two, like interview.
Oh, any two.
Any two.
You can have a survey and do interviews.
If it is prep interview, you cannot go to that person face to face. Can we do through
Zoom.
Zoom?
Yes. You have to say that in chapter 3. I'm going to do interviews. They're going to be by Zoom. Again, that's like data
Because
collection.
nowadays, due to COVID increasing, so I mentioned about that. Due to COVID, you may not be able to go. So we can use Zoom.
Yes. Yeah, you definitely, you can do interviews or focus groups with Zoom. You just have to say that's what you're going to do in chapter 3, so the IRB knows that's how you're going to do it. And of course, in the data collection section, so if I was going to try to repeat your project, I would do Zoom interviews too.
So we already submitted chapter 3, but how we get this approval? Through our mentor, through our coach?
So did you not say in chapter 3 you want to do Zoom interviews?
Yeah, I mentioned in that. But how to get approval from IRB?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about after lunch. How and when you complete the IRB application. Because the student I'm coaching actually, I was working on chapter 3. He said, yeah, I'm anxious for you to get chapter 3 back to me so I can start working on chapter 4 before my classwork starts. I'm immediately typing an email saying, whoa, it's going to be quite a while before you type anything in chapter 4. Here's the 6 different things that have to happen before you'll be typing in chapter 4. He was just a little unclear about the process. We're going to go over exactly when you can apply to the IRB and when you do the practice IRB application, who has to approve all that before you do the official IRB application. That'll be all part of our IRB discussion, which will be next. We may end up doing some of that before lunch. Then we'll talk about IRB, that process, get input from the folks here who have IRB approval. Then we're going to talk about 4. And as we have time, well, we're definitely going to talk about all of 4 in the beginning of chapter 5. And we'll highlight the last few headings in chapter 5, but they're pretty easy. They're probably the easiest to write of the whole dissertation. I see some other hands that I didn't recognize. Okay. We've got a few minutes left before noon. And as you were told, the cafeteria is open today and next week. And I failed to say that I think that in your welcome package you got, if you signed up for the lunch program, there should be some tickets in there for you. Okay, so the process is when you finish chapter 1, and then you probably sent it to your coach and got some feedback. You finished chapter 2, sent that and got some feedback. Now, when you finish chapter 3, you send that to your coach and you get feedback. Once your coach says that chapters 1 through 3 are okay, and I give my approval to move forward, you have to send those 3 chapters to the DMIN office. You can't do anything before we see them. And at that point, Dr. Marmon or I, or maybe by the time yours comes in, my replacement, will review those 3 chapters, send them back to you with our recommendations. Now, here's the process you can take. When you send the 3 chapters approved by your coach to us, while we're reviewing them, in definitely less than 2 weeks, maybe less than a week, you can be completing the IRB application, the practice application. Let me just go ahead and show you where that is. But I'm not connected. Sorry, I had this up before we started. I'll try to have it up after lunch, but the seminary the IRB has its own webpage. There's a video in the middle of our former provost talking about it, and then there's buttons on either side. There's a button that would give you those templates for the informed letter of consent and the confidentiality agreement and things like that. Then there's a button called application. You click on application, it gives you 2 options. Either like the official application, I'm not sure what it says. The other choice is try a practice application. So you click on try a practice application, answer all those questions, best way you know how. But you also want to pull up what's in your dissertation resources classroom. Let's see if that's a PDF. Yes. There's a PDF called IRB Practice Application Screenshots. If you go into the dissertation resources classroom, click on chapter 3, this will be, there'll be like, I think there's an IRB heading, or at least it's under one of the headings, one of the columns, where you'll find this particular document. And here's what it does for you. It shows you the question and tells you what to put there. Like, have you completed your human subjects research training? Another link on that IRB page is human subjects research training. You have to complete that before you fill out the application. And it's just a short online course about how to handle human subjects in research. You have to watch that. You get like a certificate or a score, something on that. And then you enter that score here. And I think maybe even send the certificate if one comes to the IRB. So you fill out these questions. Then you go to this one. Of course, it says put your name, your mailing address. Mark under submission type, you put new study. Check this radio button, not this one. Now, you would do this one if the IRB said your addendum was so extensive, like you were talking about, Dan. If it's much more than just one thing, they'll probably want you to resubmit, and that's what you choose only in that case. Then, of course, affirm this statement about the research. And then in places like this, where it says, research team, please list all research team members, their affiliation. Like describe the training plans as A, B, state whether you're not planning to use confidentiality agreement, etc. Then in this column over here, Lacey Craig put these together for us after we worked on this together. It describes exactly how you should answer that question. Now, so many of our folks fill out the practice IRB application and never look at this page, because I have to go back and fix multiple things for them or tell them how to fix them that were described very clearly here. Like they don't even put the name of their coach here. And this says specifically, put the name of your coach here. So there's detailed descriptions of how to answer the question and what to include. So be sure and look at that. Just print this out and put it beside your computer while you're doing the practice IRB application. And this goes through the entire application, giving these kind of guidelines. Now, once you finish, it tells you it will send a URL address to the email that you put at the beginning of the form, where you put your email address, whether it's your seminary email address or personal email address. I suggest you use seminary, but it'll send a link to that address, and then you would send that link to your coach and to the DMIN office. Now, you can do the practice application while the DMIN office is reviewing your 3 chapters, so you can save a little time. When we send you back your 3 chapters with maybe some suggestions about some changes, our suggested changes might have to do with formatting or wording, might not impact what you put on your IRB application. If what we suggested did not affect your application, then you don't need to change anything. But you'll send that URL, that same link to us, we'll review it. We can open up your actual application and add notes to each question. It won't let you do different font colors, but I tell my students, okay, I'm going to put my notes here. They're going to be in all caps. Because when you answered your question, you didn't type in all caps. But I'm going to put my suggestions there. So like if you left out your coach under this, under the research team question, I would type there, add your coach's name. Be sure and add DMIN program staff. I'll just tell you the things to add, or don't even put anything here. Put NA for not applicable. You don't need to tell them anything at this point. So I will add those things to it, send the link back to you. You simply go through then and make changes that Dr. Marmon or I recommended on your practice application. And my email would usually say, if they're really significant, I'll ask you to send it to me again. If they're not, I'll say, okay, make these changes. And once you make them, you can then submit your official IRB application. So once your coaches approve the 3 chapters, One of us has to approve it. Your coach needs to see your IRB application, but the coaches don't have a lot of experience with that, so they don't often make comments. Dr. Marmon and I will make comments and add things to your IRB application if it needs them, ask you to make those changes, then you can submit your official one. And as you're going through this, the application, it'll be in a place where it'll say, you know, describe your letter of informed consent, and it'll say, be sure and send a copy to irb@asburyseminary.edu. So there'll be several things they'll want to see. They'll want to see your instruments. They want to see your letter of informed consent. They'll want to see signed confidentiality agreements if people are helping you with your study. So once you submit your official application, be sure you've made a list of all the things they've asked for, then immediately send an email to irb@asburyseminary.edu, attach all those items, and your submission will be complete. Now, if you leave something out or don't send something or answer something wrong that we didn't help you with, the IRB is going to come back and ask you for some additional things. So some of you here who have IRB approval, will you ask for additional items or clarification? And if so, what were those? Anybody's IRB application go through the first time with no additional references? Okay. That's good. Hopefully we did a good job in helping you make sure it was right.
Well, I know I attached stuff, but it was too long ago to remember what all I attached.
Okay.
It was back in like February or something.
Well, it should be described. It should be mentioned that when there's a question that relates to something you need to send in, it should tell you that. So if you'll make those notes as you go along, you'll know what to send.
You know, it took a while for my application because there was some change in the IRB staffing or something. Like, has that been figured out? Like, I just.
We're close.
Okay.
The person that heads up the IRB or is in charge of that process is working out a way that we can get IRB applications approved without everybody on the committee having to read them. Everybody on the board, Institutional Review Board. We believe that's going to be in place pretty soon. So if you're going to be submitting your IRB application, you know, if 2 or 3 weeks from now, we're hoping that's going to be in place. And instead of 4 to 6 weeks, it can be approved in 2 to 3. So we're hoping to make that more efficient.
I
Yes.
can just say Dr. Lowe's the man. I was all backed up and waiting. I sent you an email and like the next day, boom, I had approval.
Well, if it's been a while, you need to let me or my successor know once he or she gets here. Usually if we prompt the IRB, they'll go, because they're faculty members, they've got other jobs, they've got lots of commitments, and sometimes it just got by them or they just haven't taken time yet. So we'll prompt them for you if you don't hear back in a reasonable amount of time. But we're hoping the need for that even disappears with our new process once it gets in place. But thank you for that. I've seen that happen a few times where I would send an email and the next day I saw an approval email. I was, yeah. Okay, well, it's 6 minutes for 12. I don't think I need to try to fill 6 minutes. When we come back, any IRB questions come to mind, we'll answer those. Then we're going to jump into chapter 4. We'll have from 1:30 until 3 to look at chapters 4 and 5, and that should give us quite a bit of time to highlight those things and hopefully offer something meaningful to folks who already have IRB approval.
Can we leave our stuff in here or we need?
Yeah, it should be fine. No problem. Okay, let's have some lunch and I'll see you back here at 1:30. Thanks to you folks online. Be sure to get my attention if you have a question or something. I apologize for not asking you if you had questions more often. Sure, that's okay. Yeah, I talked to him last week.